The day had begun like any other aboard the Terran Empire's Central Space Command. High Admiral Lena Kane stood before the command display. A holographic map of the galaxy spread out in front of her. It showcased the vast expanse of human-controlled territories, a shining testament to humanity's growth and survival in the cold, hostile universe. For centuries, the Terran Empire had maintained a careful balance of power in the galaxy, but that balance was about to be shattered. "Admiral, we've received a transmission from the Galactic Council," a junior officer reported, his voice tense with uncertainty. Kane turned sharply, her steely gaze locking onto the young officer. "Put it through," she ordered. Her instincts, honed over years of warfare and diplomacy, warned her that this wasn't going to be a routine message. The hologram flickered, and the image of a stern alien figure appeared. It was Ambassador Tiver of the Voraki, the dominant species within the Galactic Council. His thin, reptilian features twisted into a cold expression as his voice hissed through the transmission. "High Admiral Kane," Tiver began, "the Galactic Council has decided. Humanity's expansion is a threat to galactic stability. You have violated numerous interstellar treaties and ignored our warnings. As of now, the Council issues an ultimatum. Surrender all contested systems or face annihilation." A hush fell over the command center. The weight of the threat was clear. This was no idle warning. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the most powerful species in the galaxy, had the military strength to wipe out entire civilizations. Yet Kane stood tall, her expression unreadable as the message continued. "You have one standard week to comply," Tiver concluded, his voice dripping with disdain. "After that, the full might of the Galactic Council will be brought down upon your worlds." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Kane's heart raced, but outwardly, she remained composed. She knew what had to be done. "Contact the Emperor," Kane commanded, "and alert all fleets. Prepare for battle. If the Council wants a war, then we'll give them one." The grand throne room of the Terran Empire was a symbol of human resilience and defiance. Emperor Marcus Aurelius sat at the head of the vast chamber, his face shrouded in shadow. He was a man of few words, but each one carried the weight of humanity's future. Across from him stood High Admiral Kane, her posture rigid, her expression determined. "The Galactic Council has issued their ultimatum," Kane said, recounting the details of the message. "They expect us to surrender. They believe we're weak." Emperor Aurelius leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And do you believe they'll follow through on their threat?" Kane nodded grimly. "They will. The Council has grown complacent with their power, and they view humanity as a nuisance. If we surrender, they will cripple us. If we fight, we may stand a chance." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, considering the weight of her words. Finally, he spoke, his voice firm. "We will not surrender. Humanity has fought too long and sacrificed too much to bow before a council of cowards. If they want war, then we will meet them on the battlefield." Kane allowed herself a brief smile. She had expected nothing less from the Emperor. "Our fleets are ready, but we'll be outnumbered," she warned. "The Council controls more ships, more resources. We'll need every advantage we can get." The Emperor's eyes gleamed with something unreadable, something more dangerous than the Council could imagine. "Then it's time we unveil Project Nova." Kane's heart skipped a beat. Project Nova had been a closely guarded secret, even within the highest ranks of the military. Rumors swirled about its potential, but no one knew its true purpose, except, it seemed, for the Emperor. "Project Nova?" Kane asked. Her curiosity piqued. The Emperor rose from his throne, his dark robes flowing behind him as he stepped down from the dais. "It is our trump card," he explained. "A weapon unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. One that will ensure our victory and send a message to the Council. Humanity will not be extinguished." Kane's mind raced as she tried to imagine the scale of such a weapon. "When will it be ready?" she asked, her voice low. "It already is," the Emperor replied with a faint smile. "Assemble the fleet. We're going to show the galaxy what it means to challenge the Terran Empire." The countdown to war had begun. Across the galaxy, Human colonies prepared for the worst as the Galactic Council's armada assembled on the borders of Terran space. The sheer size of the Council's fleet dwarfed anything the Empire had ever encountered, a seemingly unstoppable force poised to crush humanity under its heel. High Admiral Kane stood aboard the bridge of the flagship, the Indomitable. She stared out at the vast expanse of space, her thoughts racing. The Terran fleet had been mobilized, but even with every ship at their disposal, they were hopelessly outgunned. The Council's ships were faster, more advanced, and commanded by seasoned admirals with centuries of experience. But Kane knew that humanity had one advantage the Council could never anticipate: their unbreakable spirit. "Admiral," the communications officer called, breaking her train of thought. "We've detected movement on the Council's border. They're coming." Kane's jaw tightened. "How long until they reach us?" 2 hours, ma'am. Their vanguard is moving faster than anticipated." Kane turned to her officers, her voice sharp and clear. "Alert all ships. We engage in 2 hours. Prepare for full-scale combat." The crew sprang into action, the tension in the air palpable. Kane knew the stakes. This wasn't just about defending a single system. This was about survival. If the Council broke through here, they would sweep across human space like a tidal wave, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. She tapped into the ship-wide intercom, her voice carrying across the entire fleet. "This is High Admiral Kane. We stand at the brink of war, not because we wanted it, but because the Council believes they can dictate the terms of our existence. Today, we show them they were wrong. Today, we show them that humanity will not be pushed aside. We fight not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come. Prepare yourselves. This is our time." As the Galactic Council's armada surged toward the Terran Empire's outer defenses, the tension aboard the Indomitable grew thicker with each passing second. High Admiral Kane had fought in many battles, but none had carried the weight of what was about to unfold. She knew that brute force alone would not win this war. The Council had the advantage in numbers and technology. What humanity had was something else: ingenuity. The officers gathered in the strategy room, a circular chamber filled with holographic displays showing the positions of both fleets. Kane stood at the head of the table, her mind racing as she formulated the final pieces of their battle plan. "We can't face them head-on," Commander Hayes, the fleet's tactical expert, pointed out, his voice tense. "They'll overwhelm us in minutes." Kane nodded. "That's exactly why we won't fight them the way they expect us to." She tapped the console, bringing up a map of the outer systems, vast regions of space filled with asteroid fields, nebulae, and uncharted anomalies. These unpredictable environments were dangerous, but they also provided opportunities for anyone willing to take the risk. "Our fleet is going to draw them into the Gravenous Nebula," Kane explained, her tone calm yet determined. "Its magnetic storms will disrupt their sensors and communication systems. The Council's ships are highly reliant on their advanced tech, but in there, they'll be flying blind." Commander Hayes frowned. "And so will we." Kane's lips curled into a faint smile. "That's where our advantage comes in. Our ships are smaller, more maneuverable. We've been training for situations like this, where adaptability matters more than raw firepower. Once inside the nebula, we'll hit them hard and fast, using hit-and-run tactics. We can't take their entire fleet head-on, but we can tear them apart piece by piece." There were murmurs of agreement among the officers, though the plan was undoubtedly risky. But that was the hallmark of humanity's survival, taking risks when the odds were stacked against them. "Do you think they'll fall for it?" one of the junior officers asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Kane's gaze hardened. "The Council has grown arrogant. They believe they're invincible, and they see us as a primitive nuisance. That arrogance will blind them, and by the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late." She turned back to the display, watching as the Council's fleet continued its relentless advance. "Prepare all ships to execute the plan. We launch in 1 hour." As the officers dispersed to relay the orders, Kane lingered for a moment, her eyes locked on the map of the galaxy. The Council had given them an ultimatum: surrender or face destruction, but they had underestimated humanity's resolve. This would be a fight for survival, and Kane was determined to ensure that humanity not only survived, but emerged stronger than ever. The Gravness Nebula loomed before the Terran fleet like a swirling mass of chaos, its violent magnetic storms casting an eerie glow across the stars. For centuries, it had been considered too dangerous for any fleet to navigate, a natural barrier to those who dared venture too close. But today, it would serve as humanity's shield. High Admiral Kane stood at the helm of the Indomitable, watching as the fleet entered the nebula's fringes. The swirling clouds of gas and energy began to distort the sensors, creating ghostly echoes on the displays. It was a disorienting environment, but one that Kane had prepared her crews for. Their simulations had trained them for this moment, for the chaos of battle in such an unpredictable environment. "Report," Kane commanded, her voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "We're losing visual on the Council fleet, Admiral," the sensor officer replied. "The nebula's interference is scrambling their signals. They won't be able to track us easily." Kane nodded. "Good. That's exactly what we need." She turned to the communications officer. "Signal the fleet. Initiate phase 1 of the operation." Across the Terran fleet, ships broke formation and disappeared into the dense clouds of the nebula, each following a carefully plotted course designed to confuse the enemy. Kane's strategy relied on speed and surprise, striking the Council's forces before they could adapt to the environment. The minutes ticked by in tense silence as the Terran ships maneuvered into position, hidden from the Council's view. Then suddenly, the moment arrived. "Enemy contact!" One of the officers called out. "They've entered the nebula." On the display, the Council's vanguard ships appeared, their sleek forms cutting through the swirling gases. They moved cautiously, their sensor arrays struggling to penetrate the nebula's interference. It was clear they hadn't expected the Terran fleet to lead them into such treacherous territory. "Phase 2?" Kane ordered, her voice calm but charged with anticipation. From the nebula's shadows, the Terran ships launched their first strike. Small, fast-attack frigates darted in from multiple angles, launching volleys of torpedoes at the Council ships. The explosions lit up the nebula, sending shockwaves rippling through space. Several Council vessels were caught off guard, their shields flickering under the sudden assault. "Direct hits on their lead ships," reported Commander Hayes, a note of satisfaction in his voice. Kane watched the battle unfold with steely focus. The Council's ships began to return fire, but their shots were wild, their targeting systems hampered by the nebula's interference. The Terran frigates danced around them, striking with precision before retreating back into the safety of the clouds. "Keep up the pressure," Kane commanded. "Don't give them a chance to regroup." The Council forces, used to overwhelming their enemies with sheer firepower, found themselves in unfamiliar territory. They were being outmaneuvered, their technological superiority rendered useless in the face of the Terrans' unpredictable tactics. One by one, their ships began to falter. But Kane knew this was only the beginning. The Council's fleet was vast, and this vanguard was just a fraction of their total force. Soon, the bulk of their armada would arrive, and the real battle would begin. As the Terran ships regrouped for the next wave of attacks, Kane allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. They had drawn first blood, but the fight was far from over. The Council had underestimated humanity's tenacity and resourcefulness. But now they would see the true strength of the Terran Empire, and learn that humanity would not go quietly into the night. "Prepare for Phase 3, Kane said, her voice steady as ever. "We're just getting started." The Gravness Nebula crackled with energy as the battle between the Terran fleet and the Galactic Council's forces escalated. For hours, the Terran ships had danced in and out of the nebula's cover, striking the enemy with precision and retreating before they could retaliate effectively. But the Council's reinforcements were arriving, and the once small vanguard was now a full-fledged armada. The odds were beginning to shift. On board the Indomitable, High Admiral Kane assessed the situation with grim determination. The Terran fleet had performed admirably, but the Council's ships were adapting. Their tactics had shifted, firing blindly into the nebula, using overwhelming barrages to flush out the Terrans. A few of the smaller Terran frigates had been caught in these traps, their wreckage now floating in the nebula's stormy depths. "Admiral, our frigate groups are being forced back. They can't maintain the hit-and-run strategy much longer," Commander Hayes reported, his tone tense. Kane didn't flinch. "It's time for Phase 3. Signal all ships to pull back to the central region of the nebula." "You're pulling them deeper in." Hayes raised an eyebrow, confused. "We'll be cornered." Kane met his gaze, her expression unyielding. "Not cornered. Positioned. The Council's ships are spread out across the nebula, chasing our smaller vessels. They've fallen into the pattern we've set. Now we're going to spring the trap." Hayes looked at her, realization dawning. "You're going to use the nebula against them." "Exactly. We'll draw them into the most volatile part of the nebula, and then hit them with everything we have. This isn't about surviving anymore. It's about delivering a blow they won't recover from." The order was sent. Across the nebula, the Terran ships began to retreat toward the heart of the storm. The Council's forces, emboldened by what they saw as a fleeing enemy, followed eagerly, unaware of the danger they were being led into. As the Terran fleet pulled back, Kane activated the ship's intercom, addressing the entire crew. "This is it. We've held our ground against an overwhelming enemy, but now it's time to show them what humanity is capable of. Every one of you has been trained for this moment. Trust your instincts, trust your training, and remember, we fight not just for ourselves, but for the future of humanity. We will win this day because we have something they don't, our spirit." The crew responded with a unified cheer, their morale boosted by Kane's words. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, they believed in her leadership and in humanity's resilience. The central region of the Gravness Nebula was a maelstrom of energy. Plasma storms raged, and the gravitational anomalies made navigation treacherous. But this was exactly what Kane had been counting on. The Council's ships, larger and more technologically advanced, struggled to maintain formation as the storms interfered with their systems. Their sleek, powerful vessels were now liabilities in this chaotic environment. Kane watched the holographic display as the enemy fleet moved into the trap. "All ships, prepare to engage. Hold fire until I give the order." The tension on the bridge was palpable. The Council's forces were moving closer, oblivious to the danger. Kane's hands hovered over the controls, her eyes fixed on the display. "Now," she commanded. The Terran fleet erupted from the nebula's core with the fury of a storm. Their coordinated attack was devastating. Torpedoes and energy blasts hammered the Council's ships from all sides. The plasma storms amplified the destruction, causing chain reactions that tore through their ranks. Council ships, which had previously seemed invincible, now found themselves outmatched in the chaotic environment. One of their capital ships, a massive cruiser, was hit directly by a plasma surge triggered by Terran fire. Its shields buckled, and the ship erupted into a brilliant explosion that sent shockwaves through space. "Direct hit," Hayes shouted, exhilaration in his voice. Their flagship's been crippled. The Council's fleet was in disarray, their once coordinated efforts falling apart under the relentless Terran assault. The superior firepower of their vessels was useless without the ability to target their enemies, and the nebulous storms made communication between their ships nearly impossible. "Focus fire on their support ships," Kane ordered, her voice steady despite the mounting victory. "We'll dismantle their fleet piece by piece." The Council's forces, once so sure of their superiority, were now in full retreat. Ships that had once appeared invulnerable were now limping out of the nebula, their hulls scared and their systems malfunctioning. The plasma storms and the Terran fleet had torn them apart, ship by ship. On board the Indomitable, Admiral Kane allowed herself a moment of relief. The plan had worked better than she had dared hope. The Council's arrogance had led them into the heart of a death trap, and now the Terran Empire stood on the brink of a decisive victory. "Admiral, we've received a transmission from the Council's remaining fleet," the communications officer reported. "Put it through," Kane replied, her expression hardening. A holographic image flickered to life in the center of the bridge. A stern-faced Council commander appeared, his arrogance visibly shaken. "High Admiral Kane," he began, his voice tense. "The Galactic Council proposes a ceasefire." Kane's eyes narrowed. A ceasefire? After you gave us an ultimatum of surrender or death? After you invaded our space? The commander's jaw tightened. We underestimated you. That much is clear. But further conflict will only lead to more losses on both sides. The Council is willing to discuss terms of peace. For a long moment, Kane said nothing. The bridge was silent, the tension thick in the air. Then slowly, a smile crept across her face, cold and victorious. You're right. You did underestimate us. You thought we were weak, easy to conquer. But humanity is stronger than you could have imagined. And now you want peace, not because you seek an end to the bloodshed, but because you're afraid. The Council commander's face twisted in frustration, but he didn't deny it. Kane leaned forward, her voice a low growl. We'll consider peace, but it will be on our terms. You invaded us. You tried to wipe us out. And now the galaxy will know what happens when you threaten humanity. We don't bend. We don't break. We retaliate. The Council commander's image flickered as he tried to regain some measure of authority. If you refuse, you're in no position to threaten us. Kane cut him off, her voice icy. You started this war. We'll decide how it ends. With a sharp gesture, she ended the transmission. The image of the commander blinked out, leaving only the hum of the ship's systems and the distant roar of the nebulous storms. Admiral. Commander Hayes said quietly, What are your orders? Kane's gaze swept across the bridge, taking in the faces of her crew, men and women who had fought bravely, who had put everything on the line for the survival of their species. She stood tall, her voice firm and resolute. We pushed them back, all the way to the Council's homeworld. Let the galaxy see what happens when you challenge humanity. Prepare the fleet for the final strike. As the crew moved to execute her orders, Kane looked out at the stars beyond the nebula. The Galactic Council had thought they could crush humanity with an ultimatum, but now they would face the full force of the Terran Empire and learn the true meaning of fear. The war was far from over, but humanity had already won the most important battle, the battle for its future, and now the galaxy would never be the same.